Hey, thanks for joining me today for this episode of Curves Welcome, a podcast about facing and embracing the curves of life. If this is your first time tuning in, this is Susie Carr. Hey friends, today I'm here with my good friend Ann Roberts, and we're going to talk about how to benefit from criticism. This is a hard topic for many of us, me included, and so I just wanted to have a conversation with my friend Ann about her thoughts on this as well. Let me tell you a little bit about Ann first. Ann Roberts is an award-winning author of 20 romance, mystery, and general fiction novels, including Ari Adams' mystery series. She has been shortlisted for a Lambda Literary Award 3 times, and she has the unusual distinction of being recognized in both mystery and romance categories. In 2014, her mystery novel, Point of Betrayal, was awarded a Goldie as Best Mystery by the Golden Crown Literary Society. Ann is also the proud recipient of the Alice B. Medal for her body of work. Currently, Ann is serving as the interim executive director for the Golden Crown Literary Society, an organization that I am also proudly serving as a director of membership. Welcome to the show, Ann. It's great to have you.
Thank you, and it's great to be here. I love spending time with you, Susie.
I love spending time with you, and we've been spending a lot of time together online anyway, because we have a conference coming up. And actually, this podcast may air the same month or maybe after the after the conference. Either way, if you were at the conference, great. Hope you enjoyed it. If not, there'll be some videos that you could possibly watch.
Yes, many videos.
Many videos, yes, 50 plus. It's going to be great. Anyway, Ann, it's wonderful to have you here. And I love talking about this topic of how to benefit from criticism, because I feel in my personal life, I have benefited greatly from criticism. It is hard to handle. It's hard to receive that because the ego gets in our way, our pride, all that gets in our way. But I feel in those moments when I've had critique come my way, that if I open my heart to it and really listen to what the critique is and try to find the value in it, I come out better on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Maybe in the time I'm kicking and fighting and screaming in the back and crying maybe, but it's good if we can really open up to it. So let's open up to this topic. I want to ask, first of all, if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, something I haven't covered that maybe you might find that listeners want to know about you that I haven't said.
Well, I think probably in terms of this topic, my whole dealing with, and I'll talk a little bit about this, my favorite term for this whole area is constructive feedback. As opposed to just focusing on the word criticism. And you also use the word critique, which also has a little bit of a different connotation even than criticism. But my whole experience comes from my time as an educator, where I was a teacher. So I regularly received, feedback about performance. But then the 10 years that I spent as an administrator, where I had to evaluate 90 employees, certified staff, teachers, as well as, everybody from the custodians to the cafeteria workers. So there was a lot of, give and take about performance. As a writer, yes, you go online and, some people like prepare a stiff drink before they go look at the reviews of their books and that sort of thing. That can become more of it's really much more of a, end of the spectrum thing. I love the book, or, oh my God, this is horrible. And I have been on the end of both of those. You do read the 3-star reviews, that sort of thing. So I think as a writer, it's a little bit of a different thing, but honestly, my past as an educator and the way that I've dealt with this, I think has really affected how I've looked and managed those feelings about the reviews. But my term that I like the most when we talk about strengths and challenges of whether we're talking about a professional performance in a job, or we're talking about even how we deal with our children, or how we interplay with other people, is if we look at the word feedback, because feedback is a give and take word. I'm not only absorbing what you're saying, I'm getting the opportunity to be a participant in the discussion. I can ask questions. Feedback implies too that you're going to tell me some things I did well. That this isn't just a conversation about, you know, all the bad stuff.
That's true.
This is a dialogue about the overall situation. And again, maybe that's a professional situation. Maybe that is a personal issue that you're dealing with someone. Maybe it's a conversation, again, with children. This works especially well with younger people who are still forming their whole understanding of judgment. So constructive feedback is something that I've been having to, you know, and giving. And this is a whole way of thinking now. It was, I think, first embraced by educators about 10 years ago. And now we're seeing a lot more in other professional settings where perhaps evaluation has not always yielded the results we wanted. Specifically thinking right now of law enforcement. And the fact that they are having to really think about how they advance people.
Yes.
They're coming under a lot of judgment for that. So I think that's probably, if we can put ourselves into that mind frame of, this isn't about just people yelling at me, even if they do it quietly. It's not about, I'm just going to get yelled at.
That's so true.
It opens our heart to thinking about, okay, I there are areas where I can improve things. I have challenges, as opposed to, you know, another word that often gets associated, it's in the kind of that same corral as criticism, is weaknesses. What are my weaknesses? That's not, you know, again, that's never a word I've ever used in evaluating anyone, because I think that that's a weakness implies there's some sort of a problem at your core sort of deal. You know,
Right.
I can't lift a 90-pound boulder. Yes, that is a weak. I'm weak. I can't do that. But what we talk about are like challenges or growth areas. So that's different.
It is. And so what you're bringing up some really good points. First of all, I love how you put a spin and you turned it around using a different vocabulary, because that is so important. The words that we use have such impact. And if we use words that automatically put somebody on the defense, criticism, critique, those words have negative connotation because of our past experiences with that. And when you use the word constructive feedback, right there, you put a positive spin on it. All of a sudden, in my mind, I'm opening up to that because it's going to be constructive. That means it's going to be empowering and it's going to help me and I'm going to improve. And who doesn't want that? Because we all can improve. And
Yes.
admitting that we can all improve is not a weakness. It's a great area of being able to challenge ourselves to reach higher levels in our development and in our pursuit of purpose in this world. And that to me is such an important reminder to anybody who's listening. If you are about to give feedback to somebody, remember to frame it in such a way so the person receiving your feedback will have a little bit more of a positive spin and not so many defensive walls being erected as you sit down. Because I've sat in meetings, I've sat in performance management process meetings, PMPs. Twice a year I do that. And thankfully my employer does it in such a way that it is constructive feedback, because I've worked for other employers where it has not been framed that way. And all of a sudden you just come to that table sweating, almost crying, worried, what's at stake here, and always thinking about just what's bad, because that's how they've framed it in a professional work setting. And you brought up points about, as writers, needing a stiff drink before we go on to Amazon to read reviews, because most writers do. There are some that just really don't bother reading the reviews because it's really painful for them. I understand that. It takes a lot of effort to open up that Amazon page and almost cringing to see how many 1 stars, how many 2 stars, because it's scary. It's a scary thing, and it's a one-way mechanism. There's no feedback there other than feedback almost feels like a two-way conversation, and it's wonderful and constructive when it can be that way. So there are those limitations. But let's talk about how you have benefited from critique, or I should say constructive feedback in your life, if there's a way that you grew out of that situation.
Yeah, I all the time. Every time that so at first I think you recognize, as you've already mentioned, how the comparativeness between when you have been in a situation where you have truly received feedback and you have experienced personal growth, as opposed to when you've had folks in your life who have just been critical, or they're in a professional setting, they're just using a boilerplate form. I once had an administrator who literally cut and pasted the performance reviews from one employee to the next, and we knew that we finally figured out what he was doing, because he forgot to change somebody's name. The cut and paste didn't quite work.
Oh, that's horrible.
That was greatly demeaning for him, because it goes to part of this has to do with the person giving the constructive feedback and the respect and relationship between the two people. So yes, I have greatly benefited from constructive feedback with a number of people who first of all, in the writing forum, in that aspect of my life, in sharing with colleagues. I have a number of colleagues I call upon to beta read, or to read a part, and when people know that one, you respect them and their work, and two, that you really want to hear it, that you're not looking for oh, this is great, then they feel they can be honest, and that's really important. That's a really important thing. I think there's two things there that I've said. That first of all, that there has to be a trust and respect on both sides, and that's very hard to have. Like when we jump back to a professional setting, between a superior and an employee, an underling, whatever term you want to use. So there's got to be that mutual respect piece, but then there also has to be this created environment. Because let's face it, how many times have we people said, okay, you can tell me, just be honest with me. So then we are, and then it's like, okay, I've crushed you. And it's like, that's really hard.
Very hard.
Part of what I also do, in addition, another thing that is part of my life now, I'm no longer in the educational realm, but I'm an editor. And it's very hard starting a relationship with a new writer. I've edited probably 20 different people now for Bella Books, my publisher, and starting that new relationship is it can be difficult at first, because in a publishing world, it has to be there's not time for a lot of the niceties, and of course none of it is done in person. At least not, at first. I mean, luckily, when we have in-person conferences at the Golden Crown Literary Society, we get to meet people and that. And Zoom has actually helped a lot. With my new writers, I insist now that we have at least one conversation where we can look. You can see that I don't have three heads, that I'm not just out to your book or that sort of thing. And it's very, very helpful. But so there's that piece of that environment. And so I think that people are willing to give me constructive feedback, because when I say, just be honest, tell me, I'm not, yeah, tell me if you see something really awesome that maybe I didn't see, but I really want to know. And then they see that I interpret that and I take it. So that first time, I think, is always a risk for everybody. But once that first time happens and both parties step away from it and go, okay, this was beneficial. Because the other thing that we need to think about too, when we talk just about this whole loop of learning and judging and reflecting, is that as the giver, you can learn as much from the interaction as the receiver.
Oh, that's
That
powerful.
it's very important. When I was an English teacher, one of the things that was just coming out at the time was this idea of peer editing. So students not only got, the red marks from the teacher, but prior to submitting their paper, they were, and this has to be done in a very guided format where they read each other's work. Now you have to have, as a teacher, I had to have consideration about who's doing what and, that sort of thing. So we didn't wind up with people running out of the room in tears, but it was very structured. But they learned so much from looking at the work of their peers. And I in a writing realm, I urge every writer to be a part of some relationship with, if it's whether it's a circle, it's a group of people. I know there are lots of writing groups like that, or even if it's just with 2 or 3 people that they trust who are also engaged in craft, that you have this sort of relationship, because you truly can't improve others until you can improve yourself.
It's a really good point. In your opinion, there are going to be times when maybe critique, I'm going to use the word critique here because there is a negative connotation sometimes that is actually true. And so
Yes.
sometimes critique can come from a place of envy, of hatred, of meanness, just absolute like bulliness. And so how can we, as recipients of that, and really I'm thinking about the writers and who are listening here, because that's where it can be really hurtful, detrimental to our writing minds and our hearts. When somebody is mean and bullies us, trolls us, how do we protect ourselves from that kind of critique and be able to, is there a way? Is some of it valid? And what do we do with that? How do we best show up to be able to stay open to maybe some value even in the mean people? Because a lot of times, I got to tell you, I've learned a lot from these negative reviews that I've received on Goodreads, especially. It seems to be that's where the real problems are on Goodreads, in terms of people are brutally honest, and you can't go in there with your ego blown up, because you really need to stay open to it. And I personally have read some very hurtful reviews where I feel like I'm being attacked personally. But within those reviews, there's also some valid points, and it pisses me off that it's valid.
Yeah, and then at that point, you're wishing, God, I wish this person could write this a little better, because I really hate wading through this personal jungle hell to get to this one point. So I think first of all, it goes back to first knowing yourself. Everybody has different skins, and while first of all, bravo to anyone that will take a creative work, whether that is a book, whether it's a sculpture, whether it's anything, a piece of music, and will put it out there for other people to absorb and judge, because that's naturally going to happen. That's what we do with art. We like it, we don't like it, we're whatever. So that's the first thing I think that we have to shoulder ourselves and center ourselves to this idea that, okay, we set this up to happen. So that can hopefully give us a little bit of self-confidence with that. We also have to have, I think, develop a accurate sense of self. And that helps as well when you're looking at those kinds of reviews. And I'll go back to, if you are engaging in more of a constructive feedback loop more times in your life than not, then you have developed a sense of self-confidence about where your strengths are, where your challenges are. Because what those reviews should really be doing Is really it's one of three things that are going to happen. First of all, they're going to resonate with you because they confirm whether it's a strength, it's a challenge, it's an area you're already working on. So it's going to do that. It's going to perhaps give you something that you had not thought about, but you see the relationship. You see, okay, I should write that down because that's interesting. Because there are some people who critique, and like they are these incredibly careful readers. I mean, they may just call you out and said, you spell Lynn's name with one E, and page 9, and then on page 249 it's with an E, with no E. It's like, how do you disagree with that? It's
Exactly. Absolutely.
I'm not going to disagree with that criticism because it's true. Shame on me for where's my consistency, editor? Or they're just gonna be wrong. And I think that's okay. It's okay to look at a criticism, a critique, a review, and just say no. And I'll tell a story on myself. Not too long ago, I released a book that was a little bit different, and it used some mechanisms that I'd not used before, and I felt pretty good about it though, and my editor, who is Catherine B. Forrest, she felt good about it, but the very first review that came out on it was 1 star. And my publisher uses a reviewing system, with the advanced review copies and that. And, then I read this woman had also reviewed a book I'd recently edited. And, I was mentioned in that. And so I wrote my publisher and I just said, for right or for wrong, this woman doesn't like my work.
She had it out for you.
Well, and you know what? It's like, and I don't hold it against her. It's just like, okay, you don't like my work. I personally am not thrilled with Picasso. I'm just going to say that. Maybe I don't get it. Maybe, it doesn't mean that he's not great. It's just, he's not for me.
It's subjective.
So exactly. And that's what art is, so I just said to my book, please don't send her any more of my books because it certainly doesn't help. And of course, the book went on to have a lot of good reviews. And she really could provide me with even she admitted it. She just said, I just don't like the way she writes. Well, okay, I'll take that for what it's worth. But then you have to take that and you have to move on. And I did try to. It felt good to take a little bit of control of the situation because, indeed, yes, my publisher said we will not be sending her any more review copies of your work because she doesn't like it. But I had to have a sense of self to be able not to just be crushed by that because it was the very first review. It was like, okay, that's not like getting hit by a brick. The minute your baby is out, out in the world, there, bang, But so then what do I do with that? Well, in that case, I took some proactive, if there had been something in there that, she could, that I could take from it, I would have gleaned it. But I'll tell you this too, that there is another thing about this is that, and this goes to maybe a lot of your listeners who might be newer to whether they're newer writers, they're newer to like the big business world or whatever, and they've not had a lot of critique or evaluation happen to them. It's hard when you're a beginner. I've been an author for 16, 17 years now. I have had my work noticed. I have been rewarded for it. So when I get that kind of criticism, I am very capable of setting it, isolating it, and handling it. That's much harder when you're newer.
That is such a good point, Anne. It is.
My advice to those folk is to immediately get help. And I say that in a fun way, in that, go back to your beta readers, go back to your group around you, and say, if I really push my beta readers to not. I don't want you to be kind. I mean, if you see something awesome, say it. But if you don't, if there's really something that needs to be worked on,
That's the time. That's the
you need to
time.
tell me.
Absolutely.
And to that point, particularly for writers or anybody who does any sort of art, I think we help ourselves or hurt ourselves by what we ask of people. Just as when we don't give appropriate feedback. The parent that walks past the room and says, "Your room's messy." Well, what the heck does that mean? What is specifically bothering you? So when we, for example, with writers, when we hand over a manuscript to a beta reader, I ask very pointed questions. Like at the end of a chapter, this is what I think I'm doing. Do you see that? Did I describe this character with enough physical attributes for you? So if I'm actually soliciting feedback from people, then I am giving them a place to go. So again, we get back to this, that truly critique is a relationship. It is not merely, somebody standing there and having a bucket of water come on you and you're just taking it. It has to be a relationship. And we are as responsible when we ask people for feedback. We have a responsibility too, to help guide their feedback. Well, what do you want to know? That is as important as the feedback that they return.
Wow. All right. So what I'm taking from this, and what I hope that listeners are taking from this, is it's important for us to be able to put ourselves in the position of seeking that constructive feedback in order to grow, not be afraid of it. And so in the writing world, we use beta readers. That to me is a prime example of seeking out feedback when it really matters, because at that point when you're using beta readers, you are asking them to give you that feedback so you can improve your craft. Without that feedback mechanism, you're not going to improve your craft. You're going to keep making the same mistakes and getting the same kind of problems within the reviews when it actually goes public. So my big takeaway from this conversation today is that to be more cognizant of actively seeking out constructive feedback for the benefit of improving our lives, improving our processes, improving our crafts, whatever it is, whatever your wheelhouse is. It's really important to stay open to that and to seek it out and to I love what you said. Show up and ask them what are you expecting? What are you looking for? Because a lot of people, myself on this, I don't like open-ended situations. I like to know, what do you actually want me to tell you? Because I can pat you on the back if you're looking for that. I don't like giving that kind of feedback if it's not actually true. And you're not going to get you're not going to get the improvement process if you are looking for a pat on the back when it's not really deserved in all cases. So there's that whole sandwich effect. You start off, you open them up, you compliment them on what they're doing great, give them that constructive feedback, follow it up again with what they did and how by doing this, by adding this, man, you're going to be so powerful at the end. That's my takeaway from this conversation.
I think it's accurate. And the only other thing I would say, again, tying this back to the bigger world, is this is a huge issue for a lot of people, and because our professional life and our personal life and our creative lives are all intertwined. And when you think of how many different professions people work in their own silo, whether it's an actual cubicle that you sit at all day. In my profession, teachers went into their classrooms for decades, shut the door, and they were the masters of their domain, good, bad, and indifferent. And we can all name our great teachers. We can all name our horrible teachers. And, the same is true for all these other professions, is that we all need feedback. no matter what aspect of life we're talking about. And we need, we need to be clamoring for those mechanisms to be put in place.
Absolutely. I can't think of a better line to end this conversation on. I mean, that was a perfect point. But what I do want to do is give you an opportunity to tell us, how can people connect with you? If they want to learn more about your writing, your work, how can they connect with you? What's the best place?
Go to my website, annroberts.net. And there's people can contact me, send me email. For a short amount of time left, you can get me through the GCLS too. But no, I love talking to readers, and my website is actually undergoing an enormous overhaul. It's so enormous that it's still happening. But I've also included a ton of readings, and now every book is going to have not only the excerpt to read, it's going to have the backstory of something about the book or the setting or the place, and it will include a reading or other thing to look at, like a dessert.
Fantastic. Who doesn't love dessert? I know I do.
Yeah.
A little too much these days. And it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here on Curves Welcome podcast.
All right. It's been great. Thanks, Susie.
Hey, friends. Thanks for spending time with me today. I hope you enjoyed today's topic. If there is something you'd enjoy exploring in a future podcast, please reach out to me via my website at curveswelcome.com, and I'll work it in. While you're there, grab a free story too. It's my way of thanking you for your support of my podcast and romance novels. Also, be sure to follow the Curves Welcome podcast channel to keep up on the latest episodes. So thanks for tuning in. Until next time, go out there and continue to learn, grow, and embrace life's curves.